obviously as we step into the stage, this becomes one of the milestones that pops up is buying a house and versus renting. And again, for those of you that have not yet made that purchase, if you are planning on buying a house, I'm going to point you to that calculator, or I'm sorry, that website on the bottom of the screen, which is from New York Times and a post that they did on rent versus buy. And I'll tell you, that calculator is a phenomenal one to really help you think through all the different components and costs that come with buying your first house. Because it's not just that we need a percentage down. And again, a lot of times we're kind of getting back to that old adage of 20% down, which is a big number if we're in the Washington, D.C. area, because house prices are back to kind of where they were, if not beyond where they were a few years ago at the all-time high. What we're finding is that, and people that own their homes know this very well, there's a lot of other costs that come with owning a home than just the down payment. And if we talk about emergency savings and the importance of that, if you own a home, this becomes that much more important, because now rainy days can mean big costs. They mean the roof goes out. They mean the furnace goes out. Even just the costs that go into a lot of properties and landscaping and lawn care, and there are so many additional costs that come with owning a home that we've got to really think through and plan. And that website from New York Times and that calculator they're going to give you is a great one to really help you plan through and think through making what for many of us will be the single largest purchase decision of our entire lives. So we need to take it very seriously. We need to do our very best of cutting out the emotional component that comes with that purchase. And we need to understand this is a very important financial decision that we're going to make. For those of us that own our own home, I would tell you that if you haven't looked into refinancing in the last couple of years, and if your interest rate on your mortgage is 5% or higher, now's a very good time to double check and go through the process of evaluating, is it possible to refinance my house? And can I get my monthly payment down a little bit lower by getting my interest rate reduced some? Now, obviously, there are costs that come with refinancing, and so you need to take those into consideration. A lot of times I see these emails or these flyers that come to my home, and they say, refinance, 0 closing costs. And again, we need to understand everything has a cost. So make sure you understand the fine print of refinancing your mortgage. But I would tell you, if you look at that, if you look at your mortgage right now, and you're able to trim off 0.5% or a full percent or more, and if you've got an FHA loan or if you've got certain parameters, and again, to be able to refinance, a lot of times there's some frustration by a large portion of the population because you might not have the equity that you need, debt to equity ratio that you need to be able to refinance. And if there's not enough equity in your home and you don't have that 70% loan to value ratio that they're looking for, you might feel like your hands are cuffed. But I would tell you, just as I said with the student loan evaluation and the student debt evaluation, there's a lot more resources and programs that have come about that are making things available for you to potentially refinance your property and your mortgage. So I would say take a hard look at that. The other thing I would take a hard look at is not just automatically defaulting back to a 30-year loan. Even though some can make the argument that in this low interest rate environment, stretching the payments out as long as possible, and I've even heard people talk about taking out to a 40-year loan, makes a lot of sense. Again, there are cases where that might make sense, but for most of us, ultimately the goal is that we want to have our mortgage paid off by the time we get to retirement, right? I think that makes sense, but it has become a bit of a long lost art because we now see people buying new homes in their 50s and in their 60s, and they're taking on new 30-year loans because they're thinking, well, I'm not going to be in this house for that long anyway, maybe for 3 to 5 years, then I'm going to sell and I'm going to go relocate and buy another house somewhere else. And I would tell you that again, and this is what that New York Times calculator is going to help you to determine, is buying and selling a house is a big ordeal. And there's a lot of transaction costs that come with getting into and getting out of a home. And so you really need to be well aware of that. Not that I I would expect you to know with certainty, your plan for 10 years out from now, and that you're absolutely not going to be living in this house anymore. But you got to think about that. And if you are going to turn around and buy and sell a house pretty quickly, you got to understand that there's agency costs if you're going to use an agent to sell your home, and that's usually paid by the seller. So not a big deal to you when you're buying the house, but when you're looking to get out of the house, if you've got a $300,000 house and you're going to pay 6% in the agent fee for both the buyer and the seller, that's $18,000. So again, there's closing costs. There's other things that come with your primary residence or rental properties that you need to understand the ins and outs of that. And again, we've got some great resources for you on MoneyNav. We would encourage you to take a look there for some of these tools and some of these strategies and tips and some of the different blogs that we've written about how to most effectively achieve the goals that you have with the roof over your head, or roofs that you maybe are going to buy and rent out in the future.